Hello everyone and welcome to the second in our three-part series on recent developments under the SFDR. My name is Áine McCarthy and I'm the knowledge lawyer in the Dillon Eustace Asset Management and Investment Funds team. I'm joined today by my colleague Cillian Bredin, a partner in that team, who leads our internal ESG working group. Today we are looking at the impact of the European Commission guidance as well as the proposed amendments to SFDR put forward by the ESAs on funds with carbon emission reduction as their objective or as an environmental characteristic promoted by them. Cillian, if we look at Article 8 funds first, what are the implications from the recently issued Commission guidance?
Thanks, Áine. Yeah, so we have plenty of clients who list the reduction of carbon emissions as an environmental characteristic promoted by their Article 8 funds, and helpfully the European Commission has confirmed that the promotion of the characteristic does not itself bring the fund into scope of Article 9.3 fund, i.e. a fund which has reduction of carbon emissions as its objective. However, it has noted that where an Article 8 fund does reference the reduction of carbon emission as an environmental characteristic, that it promotes the disclosure to investors, whether that's in the pre-contractual annex or the periodic reports or the website, must make clear that this does not form part of its objective. And that would also apply equally to the marketing materials of those Article 8 funds.
Thanks, Cillian. So for Article 9.3 funds, what has changed for that category of funds under the guidance?
So I think the guidance issued by the Commission in relation to Article 9.3 funds was possibly the most surprising of all the elements of the guidance for the industry. So firstly, the Commission rode back on its stance in its July 2021 guidance and confirmed that a fund which tracks the Paris-aligned benchmark or climate transition benchmark can automatically be classified as an Article 9.3 fund. Those funds have or deemed to have sustainable investment as their objective. It also confirmed that it's possible to implement an active investment strategy and still categorise your fund as an Article 9.3 fund, provided that the fund clearly explains to investors as to how it ensures that it attains the objective of reduction in carbon emissions in line with the long-term global warming objectives of the Paris Agreement.
So if we look at the passively managed funds first that track a Paris-aligned benchmark or a climate transition benchmark, what are the implications arising from the guidance?
Well, I think that'll really depend on whether or not the fund recategorised itself as an Article 8 fund because of the previous uncertainty in relation to Article 9.3 funds and what amounted to a sustainable investment that could meet the criteria for that categorisation. So to the extent that a fund did recategorise to an Article 8 fund from Article 9.3, I expect that those impacted market participants are going back and speaking with internal stakeholders, perhaps investors, distributors, to assess whether it makes sense to categorise back up to an Article 9.3 fund.
Absolutely. And then in terms of actively managed Article 9.3 funds, what are you seeing there?
Well, I think the first point to note is that the clarity provided by the European Commission that an Article 9.3 fund could be an actively managed strategy has definitely been welcomed. As I mentioned, the Commission has made clear that any such fund needs to provide a detailed explanation as to how they can ensure that the fund can meet the objective of the reduction in carbon emission by referencing the extent to which the relevant fund really complies with the methodological requirements set down in the legislation which establishes the Paris benchmark, Paris-aligned benchmark and the climate transition benchmarks. And I suppose our reading of this really is that the fund will need to explain how their investment strategy deviates from any of the specific requirements which needs to be complied with by those particular benchmarks. So, for example, if the exclusion policy implemented by the actively managed fund differs from the exclusion policy criteria that need to be met by those benchmarks, then that would definitely need to be called out by those funds in their disclosures.
Okay, looking down the road then in terms of the ESA's proposed amendments to the SFDR Level 2 measures, what are the possible implications for, we'll say, our Article 8 funds that promote reduction in carbon emissions as an environmental characteristic, or Article 9.3 funds that obviously have carbon emissions as their objective?
Yeah, so the ESA consultation paper has proposed that where a fund, whether that's classified as an Article 8 fund or Article 9 fund, discloses a decarbonisation target, they should be required to answer specific template questions around that targets so that investors can compare decarbonisation targets across various different funds. So that would include incorporating a table in the pre-contractual annex containing information on the ultimate decarbonisation target, but also providing information on the intermediate decarbonisation target that is set by the investment manager themselves. So it would also require in-scope funds to report against those targets, as you would expect in the periodic reports, and also report on progress made during the current reporting period to allow investors again to monitor that progress over time. The ESAs, I think they've also proposed that all targets should be disclosed using a single calculation methodology and according to specific standards to ensure comparability between products.
So given that these proposals they are only at consultation stage and we're unlikely to have finalised rules before the end of this year, presumably there's no urgent action that needs to be taken by fund management companies to address the proposals.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, certainly no urgent action. I mean, we would be advising clients to look and consider these proposals, particularly where they're, where they do set decarbonisation targets, because they could be quite impactful on those organisations if they are adopted as they're currently proposed. So we expect that that's what they're doing at the moment.
Great, thanks Cillian, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope you found our conversation helpful. Please just visit our website, dilloneustice.com, to access the remaining 2 episodes in our series on recent developments under the SFDR.